The first thing I learned about a sealed room is that it has its own weather. It breathes, not with lungs. There's nothing so kind as a draft, but with temperature and pressure, with the subtle bulge of air against your ears, as if the walls are deciding whether to crush you or let you keep your shape. I woke to that pressure, to the sensation of being held under a hand. At first I thought it was my own palm on my face. My cheek was cold where it pressed against the floor. The concrete had a damp, gritty chill that crawled into my skin and sat there. I tried to lift my head and found my neck resisted, stiff with sleep and something else. Something like stubbornness. The room smelled like wet pennies and old paper, and the stale breath of places that never see sunlight. I opened my eyes. The light came from nowhere I could identify. A dim yellow-gray pallor that clung to the surfaces instead of illuminating them. The kind of light you get in a basement at 2 a.m. when you're too afraid to turn on the overhead, because it will show you the shape you already feel behind you. 4 walls, close enough that when I pushed myself up, my knuckles almost grazed the one behind me. A low ceiling, no windows. A metal door with no handle on my side, smooth as a tongue pressed flat, interrupted only by a narrow seam where it met the frame. And in the corner, sitting like a piece of furniture nobody remembered to move out, was a body. It was on a cot, a simple metal frame, thin mattress, a sheet pulled up to the chest. For a long, stupid moment, my brain refused to name it. I called it someone sleeping, the way you call a wolf a dog when you're a child and you want it to be safe. The sheet rose in a slope that suggested ribs, then dipped, then rose again at the knees. The head was turned toward the wall. A person in a room with me. My mouth opened. Nothing came out. The room's air tasted like copper and dust, and when I tried to inhale deeper, it caught in my throat, as if the atmosphere itself had hands. I got to my feet too fast and the world tilted. My palms slapped the wall for balance. The concrete felt slick with moisture, like skin that had sweated and then forgotten why. "Hello?" I whispered. My voice sounded wrong, too loud, too small. No answer. I took a step toward the cot, then stopped. The instinct that stopped me wasn't fear at first. It was etiquette, the old reflex of not waking a stranger. Then the smell shifted. It didn't hit like a wave. It seeped up as I moved closer, like stepping into a different layer of air. A sweetness underneath the pennies, something cloying and sour at once, like fruit left too long in a bowl until it gave up and began to reorganize itself. My stomach tightened. No, I thought. No, no, no. I retreated 2 steps and pressed my back to the opposite wall, as far from the cot as the room allowed. There had to be a reason. I scanned the room the way you scan a stranger's face when you've forgotten their name, looking for anything familiar enough to grab. The room was mostly empty. The cot. A metal sink bolted to the wall without a faucet. A drain in the floor near the center. A vent near the ceiling with its slats painted shut. A single bare bulb in a wire cage, but no visible switch. On the wall opposite the cot, at eye level, there were marks. Not graffiti exactly, not words. Scratches, shallow but frantic, as if someone had taken a coin and traced the same shape again and again until the concrete gave up and retained the memory. A circle. Inside it, 2 lines crossing. Something like an eye. The sort of symbol you'd pass on the street and forget immediately. Except in this room it felt like a message. My fingers went to my pocket automatically. Empty. My other pocket. Empty. No phone. No wallet. No keys. The last memory I had was... My head throbbed when I tried to reach for it, the pain sharp enough to make me blink tears. A smear of images, a staircase descending into shadow, the smell of bleach, someone calling my name, a hand on my shoulder, then the pressure of the room. Then nothing. I slid down the wall until I was sitting, my knees pulled to my chest. The concrete pressed dampness into the backs of my thighs. I listened. Silence is an absence. In a room like this, silence is a thing. A thick fabric stretched tight. Under it, the smallest sounds become huge. My own breathing. The faint drip of something in the drain. And from the cot's corner, the softest rustle. A movement. I froze. It wasn't the body. The sheet didn't rise. The mattress didn't shift. The sound was lighter. A whisper of small legs against fabric. A fly. Or something like it. My skin crawled. I forced myself to stand. The door. I went to it and pressed my ear to the seam. Metal, cool and indifferent. I pounded once with the heel of my hand. Hey, anyone. The sound exploded and died, swallowed. I pounded again. My palms stung. No answering footsteps. No muffled voices. Only my own echo. Smaller each time, as if the room was learning to ignore me. I tried the door with my fingers, searching for a hidden latch, a keyhole, anything. Smooth. The seam might as well have been drawn on. I leaned my forehead against it and squeezed my eyes shut. Think. Kidnapped? Arrested? A prank? A dare? The presence of the cot made it feel official, institutional, like a holding cell. But Wyatt. I looked over my shoulder. The sheet on the cot remained still. The smell remained. I tried to swallow and my mouth felt dry, as if the air was stealing moisture for itself. I crossed to the sink and turned the non-existent faucet out of habit. My fingers met only cold metal and the rough seam where something had been removed. Above the sink, a square of mirror was bolted to the wall. I didn't notice it at first because it was so dirty it reflected almost nothing. Then my eyes adjusted. A face. My face. Pale. Beads of sweat at the hairline despite the room's chill. Eyes wide in an expression I didn't recognize as my own. I leaned closer. There was a bruise at my temple, the color of a storm cloud. My lower lip had a split, dried. My throat bore faint red marks, like the beginning of a handprint. I touched them and flinched. What happened to me? The mirror's glass was fogged at the edges, not with steam but with grime, and when my fingers traced it, they came away with a gray smear. Under the grime, carved into the concrete behind the mirror, were more scratches. Letters. They were so faint I had to angle my head, watching the light catch the grooves. Close your mouth. The words were uneven. The lines trembled. Below them, smaller, don't breathe their air. My chest tightened. I backed away until my shoulders hit the opposite wall. Their air, the smell, the body. A thin sweat broke across my back. I pressed my sleeve over my nose and inhaled through the fabric. The stench dulled but didn't disappear. It was everywhere. It was in the pores of the concrete. My eyes fell to the drain in the floor. A ring of darker staining around it, like the concrete had been perpetually damp there. And near it, a faint trail of something dried, brownish, leading toward the cot. Number. I could not look at that. I could not think what it might have been. Instead, I forced my brain back to the marks. Close your mouth. Don't breathe their air. This wasn't a jail. Not if someone had time to carve warnings behind a mirror. My gaze slid again to the symbol on the wall, the circle with the cross. A ritual. A cult. A panic spiral tried to take hold, tightening my ribs like a belt. I fought it by counting. 4 walls, 1 door, 1 cot, 1 corpse. I stopped. I hadn't said it. I hadn't allowed the word. But it was there. It had to be. I took a step toward the cot and forced myself not to retreat when the smell thickened. The sheet was plain white once, now yellowed at the edges. It was tucked neatly, like someone had cared. I reached out. My fingers hovered. If I pulled the sheet back, I would confirm it. If I did not, my imagination would keep inventing. My hand shook. I grabbed the sheet and yanked. The fabric rasped over something stiff, and then caught. The head rolled slightly, the motion slow and reluctant, like it was heavy. The face turned toward me. I saw skin the color of candle wax left in heat, waxy, swollen in places, sunk in others. The mouth was slightly open, teeth visible behind darkened lips. The eyes were closed, lashes clumped. The smell surged. I gagged and stumbled back, the sheet slipping from my fingers and falling in a heap. The body remained, too still, too final. A fly crawled across the cheek, disappeared into the corner of the mouth. I pressed my sleeve to my face and retched dryly. There was nothing in my stomach but fear. When I looked back, my vision swam. The corpse's chest did not rise, but my mind insisted it had. A faint, impossible expansion. I blinked hard. It was still. My heartbeat hammered in my throat. Okay, I told myself. Okay. You're in a room with a dead body. You need to get out. You need to survive. And under that, quieter, you need to remember. I forced myself to examine the room more carefully. The cot's frame was bolted to the floor. The mattress was thin, torn at one corner. There was a brown stain on the sheet near the body's abdomen. Dried, old, not fresh. The smell was old. How long had this person been here? A day? A week? Long enough for the room's air to become theirs. I turned away, not trusting my stomach. On the wall near the door, half hidden behind the cot's headboard, was a rectangle of paper taped up. A newspaper clipping. The tape had yellowed. The paper was brittle. Someone had pressed it flat with obsessive care. I moved closer and squinted. The headline was smudged but readable. Unsolved. The Saint's Cellar. Deaths continue. Below it, a grainy photograph of an old building with a slanted roof, its windows dark. My pulse stuttered. Saint's Cellar. The phrase landed like a pebble thrown into a well. Small, but the echo deep. I didn't know why it mattered. I read the clipped article as best I could. It mentioned a neighborhood name I couldn't place, a church that had burned decades ago. Rumors of a basement room where people were found dead with no sign of entry. No sign of entry. My eyes flicked to the door. A chill crawled up my arms. The article said the deaths were called ritualistic by tabloids, but police had found no evidence of cult activity. No candles, no blood, no symbols, except... I looked at the circle on the wall, except the symbol in the room. They missed this, I thought. Or perhaps the room hadn't existed when they searched. Or perhaps the room moved. My mind reached too far and almost toppled. I shut my eyes and pressed my forehead to the wall. Breathe. Through your sleeve. The corpse's smell clung to the air like humidity. I sat again, my back to the door now, as if I could guard it with my spine. Time passed in uneven chunks. Without a window, without a clock, minutes and hours became guesses. The light never changed. The room never cooled or warmed. The only change was in my awareness of the smell. At first it was an assault. Then it became the background. And that somehow made it worse. Because when your body stops reacting, your mind starts. It started to fill the room with voices. At some point I realized I had been whispering, not speaking to anyone, just whispering to keep sound in the air. I didn't mean to, I heard myself say. I stopped. I hadn't meant to what? The memory headache returned, sharp and stabbing behind my eyes. I pressed my fingers to my temples. A flash. A woman laughing. A glass clinking. A hand reaching for mine. Another flash. Red tail lights on wet pavement. My stomach twisted. No, I said aloud, louder than intended. The room swallowed it. I stood and paced, 3 steps one way, 3 steps the other. Every pass near the cot made the air heavier. Every pass by the mirror made my reflection look stranger, as if my face belonged to someone trying to remember how to be human. On my 5th circuit, my foot scuffed something near the cot's leg. A small object rolled. I froze. A ring. Gold. Simple. With an inscription on the inside. It had been hidden in the shadow under the cot. My fingers trembled as I picked it up. The metal was cold, but not as cold as the room. I turned it. The inscription was faint. M+E, and a date. I stared until my eyes watered. The letters meant nothing, and yet, a pressure behind my sternum, like something pushing outward. Not pain, recognition. My mind tried to supply names. Emma. The name surfaced like a body in dark water. I gasped through my sleeve. Emma. I didn't know an Emma. I knew. The headache spiked. A wedding, not mine. White chairs. A woman in a dress with lace sleeves. A smile that looked like sunlight even through memory fog. My hand tightened around the ring. Mara, I whispered. The name came with the image of a laughing mouth. Mara and Emma. I staggered back against the wall. Why were those names in my head? Why did the ring feel like it belonged in my palm the way a missing tooth feels like it belongs in your tongue? I looked at the corpse. The sheet had fallen to mid-chest. The head was turned slightly toward me. I couldn't see the face now without feeling my throat close. But I saw something else. On the corpse's left hand, a pale band of skin where a ring had once been. My lungs stopped. My fingers opened. The ring lay in my palm like an accusation. "I'm sorry," I said, and didn't know to whom. The words tasted like coins. Time did what it always does in places like this. It turned inward. My body began to ache from the hard floor, from the constant tension in my muscles. My throat burned from breathing through cloth. I tried the vent. It was bolted shut, its slats clogged with paint. When I scraped at them, flakes came away, revealing metal beneath. The air that came through was no fresher. It smelled the same, as if the room's breath fed itself. I tried the door again, my knuckles bruised. No answer. At some point, I pressed my ear to the seam and whispered, "Please." Still nothing. The room answered only with its quiet. When my mind could no longer bear the nothing, it began to fill it with history. I went back to the newspaper clipping and read it again. It mentioned the building, St. Dymphna's Church, the patron saint of... My brain dredged up the fact with the certainty of something memorized long ago. Mental illness, madness, an old story. A saint kept in a room, persecuted, isolated. A cellar. A room. The article said people called it the Saint's Cellar after the church burned and only the basement remained. It said the bodies were found in rooms with no exits. It said some had scratched messages into the walls, like mine. Close your mouth. Don't breathe their air. There. Not this. Not mine. There. Plural. My eyes traced the scratches on the wall. The circle. The cross. An eye. A ward. Or a trap. I leaned in and saw beneath the scratch symbol, almost too faint to notice, another set of marks. Not words. Tally marks. Hundreds of them. Some counted cleanly in fives. Some were gouged out, frantic. Time measured by someone else. Someone else who had sat here, counting, losing their mind one day at a time. My throat tightened with something like empathy and horror. If this room had held others, then it had a pattern. And patterns are stories the world tells itself. I didn't want to be the next chapter. The corpse became more present as the hours wore on. It didn't move, but the room did. The air shifted. The smell deepened, thickening in a way my mind insisted was change. I began to notice tiny details I hadn't before. The slight swelling of the tongue between the corpse's teeth, the darkening at the corners of the eyes, The way the skin on the hands looked too tight. The flies came in twos, then threes, as if summoned. I never saw where they entered. They simply were there. A low, insistent hum that felt like it was inside my skull. Once I swatted one and it smudged against my palm with a greasy streak. I wiped my hand on my pants and wished I could wipe my thoughts the same way. I started talking. Not to the corpse. To myself. To the room. "Okay," I said, pacing. "Okay, here's what we know. We know we're in someplace. We know someone has been here before. We know there's a body. We know I woke up here. We know." My voice shook. "We know I'm not supposed to breathe their air." The words made no sense. Air is air, unless it isn't. Unless something in it could. The newspaper, the symbol, Saint Dymphna, madness, a room that made you lose your mind. I laughed once, short and sharp, and the sound bounced off the walls like a thrown object. "I'm already losing it," I whispered. The mirror showed my reflection watching me. My reflection's mouth was slightly open. I snapped it shut. "Close your mouth." I pressed my lips together hard enough they hurt. The ring still sat in my pocket like a weight. It became my talisman, the only thing in the room that felt like it came from a world where doors opened. When I couldn't stand the smell, I held the ring to my nose, breathing the faint metallic scent of my own skin instead. It didn't help. The air was everywhere. At some point I found myself standing over the corpse again. I didn't remember walking there. The sheet was lower now, as if it had slid on its own. The face was fully visible. I stared. The features were distorted by the swelling and the stillness, but there was something familiar in the curve of the brow, in the shape of the nose, in the way the hair, dark and matted, fell across the forehead. My heart pounded. No. I leaned closer, resisting the urge to vomit. The flies lifted and resettled. The corpse's lips were parted. Inside the mouth in the dark, I saw something pale. Not a tongue. Paper. A strip of paper tucked behind the teeth like a secret. My stomach lurched. I should have walked away. Instead, my hand reached out. It moved like it belonged to someone else. My fingers pinched the edge of the paper. The corpse's jaw did not resist. The paper slid out with a faint rasp. I staggered back, holding it at arm's length. The strip was damp at one end. My fingers tingled as if the touch itself could infect. On it, in cramped handwriting, were words. My eyes darted over them. "I didn't kill you." "You did." Below that, one more line. "Stop running in here." My breath caught in my sleeve. I looked up at the corpse. Its head was still turned slightly toward me. Its closed eyelids looked less like rest and more like refusal. "You did," I whispered. My mind tried to reject the sentence. "I didn't kill anyone. I've never..." The memory flash struck again, brighter. Tail lights. Rain. The sound of metal folding. The scream. Not a scream. A gasp. Someone's mouth opening. My hands on a steering wheel. my voice saying, "I didn't see you." A woman in the passenger seat turning toward me. Mara, her eyes wide, her hand reaching, a ring on her finger. Then darkness. I doubled over, retching, and this time something came up. Bitter, hot bile that burned my throat. It splattered on the concrete. The smell of my vomit mingled with the room's sweetness, and my head swam. I wiped my mouth with my sleeve. "Close your mouth. Don't breathe their air. Don't breathe their air." If the room was about madness, it was doing a thorough job. I pressed my back to the wall and slid down. My hands shook so hard the paper fluttered like a trapped moth. You're not her," I said to the corpse, but the curve of the brow, the shape of the nose, the hair, and the ring. Mara. I had been in a car. There had been an accident. And in my mind's flash, she had been alive beside me. Then what? Did she die? Did I leave her? Did I stared at the corpse and whispered, "Emma?" The name felt like a key. The other name on the ring. M+E. Mara and Emma. A couple. A marriage. I had known them, hadn't I? The room tightened around my ribs. I thought of the newspaper clipping. The Saints' Cellar deaths. People found in locked rooms. Police baffled. What if the room didn't have to be in the basement of a church? What if it could appear? What if it could swallow? Like guilt. I laughed again, harsher. "That's ridiculous," I told the concrete. But my laugh sounded like it belonged to someone else. Someone with too many nights in their eyes. I tried to focus on concrete facts. The ring. The note. The scratches. The bruise at my temple. The red marks on my throat. Someone put me here. Or I put myself. The note said, "Stop running in here. Stop running in here." It implied this wasn't the first time. I looked at the tally marks again. Hundreds. Had I made them? Had I sat here counting days? I rushed to the wall and traced the tally marks with my fingertips. Some were fresh, the grooves bright against the gray. Some were old, filled with grime. My skin prickled. My nail caught on one of the fresh ones. There was a sliver of dried skin in it. Mine. The room tilted. I backed away. "No," I said, breath ragged. The mirror caught me. My reflection's eyes were wild. Behind my reflection, in the mirror's dirty glass, I saw the cot. The corpse. And for an instant, just an instant, the corpse's eyes were open. I spun. The eyes were closed. My heart beat so loudly I thought it might split the room. The flies hummed. The air pressed. I stared until my eyes watered. Nothing. I turned back to the mirror. My reflection stared at me. Its mouth was open. A thin line of saliva at the corner. I snapped my mouth shut. My lips stuck together. Dry. Don't breathe their air. A thought came, unbidden, like a voice. It's not the air. It's what you let in. I shook my head. I was talking to myself again. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay. You're hallucinating. You're dehydrated. You're in shock. I needed water." The sink was dry. The drain in the floor had moisture around it. I crouched and pressed my ear to it. Faint, far below, a sound. Not dripping, breathing, slow, patient. I jerked back. My skin erupted in goose flesh. The sound continued. It wasn't loud. It was certain. It came from below as if something under the concrete was exhaling into the room, like the room itself had lungs. I looked at the vent, painted shut. I looked at the door, seamless, no way out, no way for air to come in, unless it was coming from beneath, unless the room drew its breath from something else. Don't breathe their air. Whose air? The dead. The saint's cellar. All the people who had been trapped. Their last breaths. Stored. Recycled. An impossible thought. But in this room, impossible was the only currency. I sat with my back against the cot's cold metal leg, because I couldn't bear to sit with my back to the corpse anymore. If something moved, I wanted to see it. I held the ring and the paper. My mind began to assemble a story. Not the true story. Not yet. But something. I had known Mara and Emma. I had been in a car with Mara. There had been an accident. The note said I killed her. Maybe I had. Maybe not with intent, but with negligence, with drink, with distraction, with the belief that the world was forgiving. A memory came clearer. A bar. Laughter. Mara sliding a beer toward me. "You can sleep on our couch," she'd said. Emma smiling, already tired. Me saying, "I'm fine. It's just down the road." Mara frowning. Emma touching Mara's arm. Me standing, stubborn. The sound of rain on the awning. Then tail lights. Then metal. Then darkness. I pressed the heel of my hand into my eye until sparks danced. "I'm sorry," I said again. The corpse did not answer, but the room seemed to listen. The air pressed closer. The smell thickened. Or maybe my fear did. Hours or days later, when my throat felt like sandpaper and my stomach gnawed itself, I began to realize the room wasn't letting me die. Not quickly. It gave me enough air to breathe, enough light to see, but no water, no food, no escape. It wanted endurance. It wanted time. Time for the smell to work into my pores. Time for the corpse's presence to become my only companion. Time for my mind to eat itself. I began to hear things. At first it was the vent, a faint tapping that could have been pipes settling. Then it was the door, a soft scrape like a fingernail along metal. Then, once, it was the corpse, a sigh, so small I might have imagined it. But I saw the sheet lift the slightest fraction and settle. My blood went cold. "No," I whispered. The corpse stayed still. The flies hummed. The room breathed. I crawled backward until my spine hit the wall. My hands fumbled along the concrete until they found the carved warning behind the mirror. Close your mouth. Don't breathe their air. I pressed my lips tight. I breathed through my sleeve. And still, the room's air seeped into me. It was impossible to keep it out. It entered through my eyes, through my skin, through the pores of my thoughts. I started to dream while awake. In the dreams, the room was larger. In the dreams, there were more cots, more sheets, more shapes beneath. In the dreams, the symbol on the wall pulsed like a pupil, dilating. In the dreams, I stood at a wedding again, but the guests were faceless, and the bride's smile was too wide. In the dreams, the ring was on my finger. I would wake with my hand clenched, heart racing, and find the ring still in my pocket. One time I woke with the ring on my finger. I stared at it until my eyes blurred. Had I put it on in my sleep? Had it moved on its own? I yanked it off and threw it across the room. It hit the concrete with a clink and rolled to a stop near the drain. The sound echoed. The room held that echo longer than it should have, as if savoring it. I watched the ring. It didn't move, but when I blinked, it was closer to the drain. Number. My eyes snapped open wider. I hadn't seen it move. I blinked again. It was at the drain's rim. My breath caught. I lunged for it. My fingers reached. The ring slipped and fell. It dropped into the drain with a soft, final clink. I froze. Then I scrambled, pressing my face close to the opening. Darkness. And far below, something glinted faintly. The ring resting on, not the bottom, on something that moved. Slow, like a tongue. A low exhale rose from the drain. The air that came up was colder, and it carried the scent of rain. For a second, my throat loosened with desperate hope. Fresh air, outside, escape. I leaned closer. The exhale deepened. The smell of rain became the smell of wet asphalt, of exhaust, of burned rubber. My memories slammed into place. The road, the crash, the sound, Mara's hand slipping from mine, Emma screaming my name, my own voice high and panicked. Call an ambulance. Emma's face streaked with rain and something darker, her shouting, "You can't just..." And me running away from the twisted metal, running away from Mara's stillness, running into the dark, into a basement door, into a place beneath a burned church, because I remembered stories and thought confession required a room. The saint's cellar, a place people whispered about as a punishment, a place you entered when you wanted to be swallowed. My hands shook. "I came here," I whispered. My voice cracked. "I came here." The note in my hand fluttered. "Stop running in here." I had run here before, again and again, each time trying to hide, each time believing the room would absolve me if I suffered enough. The tally marks, hundreds, days, maybe years, but my body, I looked at my hands. They were trembling, yes, but they were not emaciated. My nails were trimmed. My skin was bruised but not wasted. How could I have been here for years? Unless the room didn't keep time. Unless it kept you. The drain exhaled again. This time the air carried voices. Faint. Distant. A woman crying. A man saying, "We found him." A second voice. No sign of entry. My skin went numb. The voice continued, distorted by distance and concrete. "We found him locked inside with her." How? Locked inside. With her. My eyes snapped to the corpse. I had been found here. With Mara. Then why was I still here? My mind surged with the need to understand. I crawled to the cot, ignoring the smell, ignoring my nausea. I leaned over the corpse. The flies lifted lazily. I stared at the face. Mara. It was her. I knew it now, beneath the distortion of death. Mara's freckle at the corner of her mouth. Mara's slight scar on her chin from a childhood fall. I remembered touching that scar once when she'd laughed and told me to stop. My throat tightened with grief. And then, beneath grief, something darker. Because the corpse's skin was not the only thing that was wrong. The corpse's left hand, the pale ring band, the empty space, and on the corpse's right wrist, a bracelet, thin braided cord, with a small metal charm, an eye, a circle with a cross, the symbol. I stared. The charm swung slightly, as if stirred by a breath. The corpse had been wearing the room, or the room had been wearing her. My mouth opened in a silent gasp. The warning, "Close your mouth." I clamped it shut, too late. The smell surged into my throat. Not just smell, something like a taste of earth, of old prayers, of words spoken into concrete. My eyes watered. My mind flashed. Mara and Emma at the burned church months ago. Mara laughing nervously, Emma saying, "It's just a story." Me rolling my eyes. Mara stepping down into the basement anyway. Her voice echoing, "It's so small." Emma's hand gripping mine. Then a different memory. Not mine. A woman in a long dress, hands bound, being pushed into a stone room. A priest's voice. "Saint Dymphna, keep her mind." The door closing. A scream. The scratch of fingernails. The circle carved into the wall. My stomach lurched. I staggered away from the cot. The room swayed. My reflection in the mirror seemed to lean toward me, hungry. The voices from the drain grew louder. Not outside voices. Inside voices. Emma. "Mara?" Her whisper in the room right behind my ear. I spun. Nothing. Then, from the corpse's mouth, a sound. A wet, slow exhale. I froze. The corpse's jaw shifted. The eyelids did not open, but the mouth widened slightly. as if making space. My blood went cold. "No," I whispered, though my mouth barely moved. The corpse exhaled again, and this time, the air that came out carried words, not spoken, felt. "You keep coming back." My knees buckled. I pressed my hands to my ears. The words were inside my skull. "You keep bringing your guilt. You keep bringing your breath." I shook my head. "I didn't." "You did." "The note." "You did." My throat tightened until I could barely breathe. The room's pressure increased, as if the air was thickening. The fly's hum became louder. The bulb in its cage flickered. For the first time since I woke, the light shifted. Not brighter, sharper, casting hard shadows. The shadows on the wall stretched toward the drain. The symbol's scratched circle looked like a pupil dilating. In the mirror, my reflection's eyes rolled back, showing too much white. I blinked. The reflection blinked out of sync. My stomach dropped. "Who are you?" I asked the room, my voice thin. The drain exhaled, the sound of rain, the sound of a car horn, the sound of metal collapsing. Then, layered over all of it, Emma's voice. Not a memory, a presence. "You left," she whispered. I spun. Still nothing. But the room's air vibrated with the words. "You left her there," Emma said. My eyes burned. "I didn't know what to do," I whispered. "You ran," she said. "The note. Stop running in here." I looked at the scratches behind the mirror. "Close your mouth. Don't breathe their air." I realized the warning wasn't about keeping germs out. It was about keeping them out. The room didn't feed on oxygen. It fed on confession, on breath shaped into words, on guilt that you let out of your mouth and into the air. Every time someone spoke, they gave the room a piece of themselves, and the room used it to build its history, to build its voices, to make a chorus. The Saint's Cellar, a place where madness and remorse were the same thing. I clamped my mouth shut. I tried to swallow my words, but tears leaked from my eyes, hot and involuntary. I pressed my sleeve to my face and breathed through it. The room's pressure eased slightly, as if disappointed. Then the corpse's hand twitched. Just once. A tiny movement of fingers, like a knock on wood. My heart slammed. The bracelet charm swung. The eye, the symbol. And I understood something with sudden, sick clarity. Mara hadn't only died in the crash. She'd come here. Or I'd brought her. Or the room had taken her because she stepped into its story. And Emma had never let her go. Emma had searched. Emma had found the place. Emma had carved warnings. Emma had taped up the newspaper. Emma had counted days. And when Emma couldn't get Mara out, Emma had done the only thing left. She had locked herself in, with Mara, with the room. And now the room had her too. Their air, plural. I pressed my hands to my mouth, as if I could keep my breath from escaping. But the room didn't need me to speak. It had my memories now. It had my flashes. It had my fear. It had my smell. It had my ring. The ring. I looked at the drain. The ring was gone. Of course it was. The drain exhaled again, and this time something rose. Not water, not smoke. A shape. A suggestion of a hand, formed of shadow and colder air, curling up through the grate. It reached. It held something between its fingers, a small glint. The ring. My breath hitched. The shadow hand lifted the ring as if offering it. A proposal. A vow. My stomach turned. In the mirror, my reflection smiled. Not my smile. A smile like a bruise. My reflection lifted its own hand. On its ring finger, a pale band of skin, as if it had worn a ring a long time and only recently removed it. The room's pressure increased again. The corpse's mouth opened wider, not to speak, to receive. The shadow hand moved toward the cot, toward Mara, and behind me, close enough to fog my ear, Emma whispered one last time. "Stop running," she said. Her voice broke. "Stay." I shook my head violently. I tried to stand, to back away, to make distance that didn't exist. My shoulder hit the wall. The wall was closer than before. Number. I turned. The opposite wall was closer too. The room was shrinking, or I was swelling, or the air was thickening into something solid. My chest compressed. I couldn't draw a full breath. The door seam vanished, smoothing over. The vent slats disappeared under fresh paint. The bulb dimmed until the light became the color of old teeth. The only bright thing was the ring glinting in the shadow hand. It hovered over Mara's open mouth, like a coin at the threshold, a toll. My mind screamed without sound. I tried to force my mouth open to shout, to beg, to call for anyone. My lips wouldn't part, not because I held them, because something else held them shut. Invisible fingers pressing from the outside. Close your mouth. Don't breathe their air. Too late. The shadow hand slipped the ring into Mara's mouth. The corpse's jaw closed. A swallow. Impossible. And in the mirror, my reflection's throat moved the same way. Swallowing. Taking something in. My stomach dropped into my feet. Because my reflection wasn't reflecting me anymore. It was reflecting the cot, the sheet, the still shape beneath, and the face in the mirror. The face was not mine. It was Mara's. Swollen and pale and wrong, yes, but undeniably hers. Her eyes in the mirror opened. They looked straight at me. Her lips, in the mirror, moved against the glass. I couldn't hear the words. My mouth was still sealed, but I could read them. You came back again. The door that had had no handle on my side suddenly grew one, a simple knob. Bright metal, clean as if newly installed. It turned. From the outside, the seam opened. A sliver of black beyond. And from that black, a breath of air drifted in. Cool, fresh, smelling faintly of rain. My lungs convulsed with need. I tried to inhale, and realized with a jolting horror that shattered the last of my denial that the room was no longer holding me inside. It was holding my breath inside. The air in my chest was thick and sweet and wrong. It tasted like pennies, like old paper, like a room that has its own weather. And as the door swung wider, inviting, the corpse on the cot sat up. Slow, deliberate. Its head turned toward the open doorway, then toward me. Its mouth opened, and with it, my lips finally parted. A word fell out, one I hadn't chosen, one I hadn't meant to give. Stay. The room exhaled, and the thing in the doorway inhaled. Somewhere in the dark beyond, footsteps approached the threshold, and I understood that the room wasn't opening to let me out. It was opening to let the next person in.